All right.
I'm gonna.
So I'm with my friend Preston here, who runs Exchange Christchurch. Um, we met at Exchange Christchurch when my friend Krishna Murari brought me over there to show me his studio that he was running from Exchange,
Yeah.
and his wife was running her studio as well. He was making scarves. I wish I was wearing it right now.
Yeah.
Merino scarves with like block printed Sanskrit designs,
Yeah.
and Hillary was making dolls, right?
Yeah. Courage dolls. Yeah, I like that she calls them courage dolls. It really sets the intention of her work, and they're both studying arts therapy now, which is actually she may have finished by now, but yeah, that's a such an important thing to have around you. So yeah, they
Oh,
were really good ones to have here. They were
they're a great team.
definitely.
We
Yeah.
we should. I'll put their links in the description or whatever.
Yeah. Good call. Yeah,
So
it was
tell
nice
us
to
about
have
Exchange. What
you.
is it in a nutshell? Because I know it's from our conversation yesterday. I know that's going to be a challenge to put it in a nutshell, but maybe you can do it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, and I think every time that I've explained it differently,
Yeah, yeah.
which probably doesn't help people understand it. But I guess the thing that I always kind of find myself doing is explaining first how this physical space works, because when you're dealing in physical space, it's generally pretty easy to get how it's set up, and when you understand the how, the why, it can start to make sense. And that it also, to me, is as much about the the social side as it is the spatial side, right? So the physical side and architecture. Exchange was founded by an architect, so they were wanting to push what this idea of a 21st century city like Christchurch, is kind of being reborn in that post-earthquake context. What does the future cities look like? What do their workspaces look and feel like? And how do creatives and artists thrive in those? And what is the most valuable thing to them? And it's community. And what started as a space, and that's what I'll explain and let you kind of get a sense of how the layout here is set up, is actually meant to nurture the connections and the kind of the social overlapping, and I'm kind of weaving of different art forms and different people and perspectives, and really turn diversity into kind of collective knowledge and yeah, kind of a wider spectrum of understanding, I guess, in the creation of art. So I'm standing in the main space, or what most people see as the main space. It's kind of a cafe by day, and then it's events by night, but we just call it a showcase space. So I think the thing to kind of notice about this space is that we don't like to call it a gallery. A gallery has a particular framework. Generally, they take commissions when artwork sells. We don't. We just do things by a flat rate, and that gives the creative an idea of they know what they're committing to and what they want to make back if they were to sell their work. But we also sponsor and subsidize a lot here to support mostly emerging artists. That's probably who we attract the most. So it can be something like a group show, like what's on now. So different artists have brought in works to sell, and as part of the launch, it was an auction to raise money for Black Lives Matter and other solidarity kind of organizations. But before you showcase things, you have to first produce them. So this is the other half of the warehouse that I'm kind of stepping into. And I'll just do a little walkthrough. We'll start back here, actually. You guys can see the whole thing. So we have a watercolor painter here. We have a resin and jewelry maker, painter and installation kind of builder here. Does more three-dimensional stuff.
Oh,
Painter.
is that like a brick? Are they actually bricks or is that?
Yeah. So these, like, that's a brick wall painted white, and then he's kind of drawn in between the lines of a lot of them to make it the effect kind of stand out.
Wow.
Yeah. And then down here we have a jewelry maker, does glass and beads, fashion design. Hi, Carrie. Say hi. This is Josh.
Hello.
Illustrators. We have a stop motion animator here. Kind of
That looks like where Hillary used to work from.
Hillary and Coover were just up here. So there's a builder there now that builds a lot of the furniture and takes care of the facilities. And I'll show you one of his tables out in the cafe. They're really beautiful. Postgrad in sustainable fashion, design, graphic design. I'll showcase one of our longer term residents here. Kofi painting. Street artist.
Nice. Oil painting or acrylic?
Is that painting or acrylic? Sorry. Oils.
Wow, looks great.
Yeah, so they kind of share this space here. Conscious Club, they organize events and speaker series around topics that are relevant to community.
Okay.
There was one at the end of the month on mental health. And so the collective kind of that work in that space organized those. And then Kofi's also a designer and street artist and illustrator. So the idea was to approach this city and approach its creative community and say, well, most cities have kind of on the fringes these warehouse spaces where artists kind of congregate because it's affordable, it's messy, it's low risk, it's by the train tracks, it's abandoned, whatever that kind of thing looks like. But Christchurch didn't have that. A lot of the old buildings fell down in the quakes. So this was kind of meant to like put a stake in the ground for that kind of space. So you have production space, so you can make stuff. Once you make something, you have to showcase it. And when you're showcasing it, you need to connect it with the public. So the cafe and the bar give the public this easy and accessible way to come in and see what creatives, what artists are working on in the city, what their process is like, and actually maybe have be able to assign a value to it that they wouldn't normally have. We're so used to things being overproduced and cheap in stores that when we see, a handmade or a hand knit, hat or a hood for, $50, you're like, oh, wow, I'd pay $10 from the warehouse for that. But when you're actually here and you see the effort, you kind of connect with the individual or the artist, and you can actually see that it's coming from a place of, creating a livelihood for themselves. And I'm also going to step into my office, which I'll tell you guys a little bit about in a minute. It's a little bit quieter in here. So the goal is to use like the spaces in a way that we can build the livelihoods as artists and creatives that we want, and use the kind of the dense nature of having others around us to give us feedback. The public, obviously, it can be our customers, it can be our clients. They can give us valuable feedback as well. So all of these elements are really just working together to produce an environment for growth. And when like we don't have a lot of programs here, a lot of it's done very on the fly. People might walk in off the street and might be like, I want a studio today, and I want it for a month because I'm producing a show. That's great. Like if what you're producing and why you're here aligns with why we exist, then we'll say yes. Yeah. Our residency programs, we have 2 apartments upstairs, and most residency programs are formal applications. You have to be here for this amount of time, and we expect you to produce this amount of work as the standard. But we have couch surfers who hit us up that are like, oh, I'm a musician and I'd love to play for your community. Can I come and have a place to stay? And it's like, of course, like you're bringing your art, you're bringing a gift to this community and to this city. Of course we'll host you. It goes without question. So tearing down some of those, like all of those structures and frameworks makes it accessible. And that to me is one of the secret ingredients in, I think, creativity really being permission to come out and not feel like it has to look, feel, or behave a certain way. It's really that loose construct that is it's also the fun. It's like where all the craziness happens and comes out is whenever we're just like bouncing ideas off of each other and we end up running an event that is really weird, and people enjoy that. It gives us a sense of freedom and enjoyment. So yes,
it sounds very playful.
Yeah, it is, and I think I think it's always going to kind of come and go. I think any creative loves like that they get to express themselves, they can be excited about their work, but then there's also the reality of like, is this gonna like work forever? Am I, of course you're never gonna feel that way all the time. Real life and other things, it is that balance, and I think that's also what helps us appreciate, the art and that freedom to create and express ourselves is whenever we're struggling or we hit a wall and I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I should be productive and I can't. I mean, lockdown was a really big lesson for a lot of us. We pumped, we had to close down for lockdown, but we live upstairs, and there was a bunch of us living upstairs who would come down and still say like, no, we need this. We need a creative outlet. We need a place to still create. And we actually created what's that?
What happened? Like,
oh man, we did Gender Bender Renegade nights. We did like performance showcases. We worked out. We took care of our physical bodies. We produced a show called the Rona Report, where we were recording like a news channel, like a fake but real news channel.
Oh,
Because
what? A fake real news channel.
yeah, so the Rona Report was our friends taking on different personas and being, anchor men or anchor women, as if they're, they're reporting the news. And they would just come up with really ridiculous stories of stuff that was like happening in the neighborhood, because we all went through it. We all like were going a bit like, we were noticing things that we never noticed before, or we were bored or whatever. And so we just turned them into stories and started to weave
Stuff that was actually happening in the
stuff,
neighborhood.
yeah, or like I mean, I don't know, like a dog could have ran past the building, and we would have just said like, this dog is on a mission to like do something, and then like 3 episodes later, the dog would be like, the whole reason this mission happened was because of the what is it, Teslas, or the flying satellites or something. Like,
tell me that these were recorded.
What's that? Oh yeah. It's an entire series. I'll make sure to send the link. But
Yeah.
the point was that we could also invite our friends from all over the world to submit clips and videos of how they were doing, and they would come up like with really crazy thing, like, what's your Rona Resi? We call it your Rona resolution. Instead of your New Year's resolution, it was your Rona Resi.
As in Corona.
Yeah. So people were sending in clips from the UK that were just like, my Rona Resi is to do 200 stair what do you call it, like stair slides a day. And so he recorded a video of him like going down the stairs on his butt, like, and he'd just do it like over and over again, and he'd speed up the video, and it was just really funny,
Nice.
So it is having this playfulness, like this network, and a place where it also just happens a little more spontaneously. Like, we don't have signs here. Like, we don't say do not enter, we don't say go this way, we don't say studios here or production space, or we don't say gallery. When you come
Where did you get that idea?
It wasn't my idea. I didn't start it, but it's definitely how I've seen people interact with the space. Is kind of what I'm learning about, is that what is the social, I guess it's the culture, culture is a behavior of a group, right? Or there's a lot of different ways to define culture, I guess. But for me, when I think of people who like let's say walk in right off the street, like yourself, what you're witnessing happening is far more important than what the building looks like, right? It's more of like what it feels like, and it'll feel a certain way. If people are arguing at a table, then you might kind of get this energy of just like, oh, is this like, is a therapy here? We're always processing things, and we usually base those processes, have the strongest impressions from what other people are doing. And that to me has really only shown up in the last probably 6 months or so, particularly from experiencing going to my first burn, like Burning Man. A lot of people think it's just a big party in the desert, but it's actually basically what a society would build, like if it was built by artists for a week.
Right.
That's kind of how I see it. How I
It's
experienced
a cultural element to burn, eh?
That is why it exists. It's quite interesting. And the fact that it stemmed from a group of friends that wanted to create a counterculture. They wanted to, be themselves. They wanted to express themselves, and they wanted to invite people to do it with them. And so this is where things like flash mobs came from, back in like the 70s, 80s. I think it was more like around the 80s. And this group of friends in San Francisco, they're inspired by activists and performance groups in Europe called the Situationists. Before them, it was someone else. Before them, it was someone else. Oh, the religion of, what was it? Encounter. The religion of encounter was another group. And the point was that they realized that by doing something as a collective, they would be either giving people something to witness and to learn and to think about, like what art is. You're witnessing it. I'm looking at the art on the walls. What is it telling me? What was going through the artist's head? Right. Or maybe it's a very explicit message. But this was more subtle. It was just like, hey, let's all dress up in tuxedos, get on a public bus, and have a dinner or have a dance party. And by being on that bus, you would feel like if you weren't participating, that like you were almost kind of the odd one out. So for a minute, the rules that you followed every day, or that society says you should follow, you get snapped out of. And
Yeah.
you're actually thinking like, oh, wait, well, what am I supposed to be doing here? Well, this is what everybody else is doing. So I've seen this place, the Exchange, be, because it is experimental, it changes every day sometimes, that people come in here and like they don't know what to expect, and it can be really uncomfortable, but they're really getting snapped out of their like, wait, this isn't how a cafe usually works. What's
Right.
happening here? What's my role? Why is that person doing that? You know, what should I be doing? And they're just thinking a little bit more deeply about what it means to be accepted in this space versus like stand out as different, you know? And is that okay? And are they given permission to do that? Are they being encouraged to do that? And everybody leans in at different speeds, I guess, and to different depths. But having the environment where artists are all constantly testing their practice and their environment, you know, and changing their environment, really gives that permission kind of like without having to ask for it. You know, it's almost automatic. And yeah, it's great. People in the cafe will bring canvases and just spread out and start painting, or you know, they'll bring their laptops and get working because they want that environment where they feel like they can be productive and inspired in the same place. Yeah.
What do you think the difference is between what you're creating and the experience people have just in their own homes? Because that's what people do at home, right? They just do what they want and they're just themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like you're articulating that experience and then creating that experience at Exchange for people as a business model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the business model is kind of just what makes sure that we can continue doing this. Like,
Yeah.
it didn't really come with the business model being the point. It was just, how do we achieve this thing, you know? And to, I guess, to jump back to like why it's here, our purpose is to cultivate a creative ecology. So to cultivate means to grow or to kind of nurture. Creative is operating on this, you know, it could be cultivating a business ecology, which might mean more like learning accounting skills or law or things like that associated, but it's not. It's about what is the creative edge. Thanks, buddy. Cheers. Nice. Pros. Cultivating a creative ecology. So ecology means, obviously represents that there's many parts, right? I think of nature, and I use nature a lot whenever I explain what we do, or whenever we go a little bit deeper, because we are nature. You know, our desire to grow is nature. It's inherent. Like we are constantly, you know, pulled to feel like either one, we are being accepted or being proud of something that we're achieving, or want to be recognized for it. We want to be, you know, the sense of belonging, you know, making sure that you're in an environment that's right. You know, a flower being planted, being surrounded by boulders isn't like going to get what it really needs, right? And so with that thought of ecology, you think about, well, like what are the nutrients that I'm getting? You know, like what's feeding me? Like, quite frankly, in an industrial area, we get to make a mess, but there's not a lot of green space close by. So we actually don't have as much of the embodiment and wellness side of, I think, what we need to be creative in this location. So if Exchange we were to open up somewhere else, I'd want to try to be near a park or some form of nature, because I think it's very important. It's a good reset button. It puts us back in line with nature, our natural processes, the way that our bodies think and operate. But so here, getting back in line with nature and the ecology being the purpose, and the experience that we create for people versus being in home is almost like going from being in a pot where you're just expected to, you know, maybe be fed and watered and, you know, be put into the sun when you need it, or, I guess, and actually being in nature and being in the environment maybe that you're actually meant to be in. It definitely can feel more of like an extrovert's paradise here and maybe an introvert's worst nightmare. But we also, as social creatures, need to learn how to set boundaries, how to say no to things. There's no age, you know, being a kid, a teenager, or an adult, that we stop learning. So my thing is why do we tell ourselves that when we stop school, we should know what we're going to be just doing the same thing from then on, you know, and we can stop learning now that we're done, right? We're done with the school side. And there's a lot of really great initiatives and approaches that I have, or just my own opinions on education. and how education, you can also stop me. I'll be on a roll.
I realize, but I also realize that you're on a roll, and that's when things get going good. So
Nice. Yeah, if you wanted to bring up education in some context, we can get into it later. But I feel like
maybe
the purpose of cultivating, now that I've mentioned cultivation and creativity and emergence, comes from a place of learning and like applying, right? I've learned this now, this is what it changes for me. And that never stops. That's again, part of nature, it's part of who we are, and it's everyone's life. So in school, I would say that the general model and why maybe we have some tension with the education system is it's mostly passing on knowledge, right? So a teacher learns something that has been learned and passes it on to a student. They ensure that they've learned it or memorized it so that when they go to do that task, they get it right? The more they get it right, the faster they'll go and the further they'll go in their career. So it's kind of like one line, of information. Whereas there's a form of pedagogy or learning and education that I believe in called rhizomatic pedagogy. And rhizomatic pedagogy is based on the philosophy that, like rhizomes, which are plants, potatoes are rhizomes, they don't actually have a root system that basically copies and repeats. They have a system that is constantly aware and sensing the environment. And then that's why like spuds and like little things pop out of potatoes, because it's reacting to their environment. So imagine if instead in school, a teacher says, all right, student, welcome to class. Because you're in this class, in this room, at this time, you're going to learn this thing. The teacher was to go to a student or invite a student and say, how are you feeling this morning? How would you like to learn? From reading, from a video, because every day is different. And our moods are different. Our mental, cognition and availability is different every day. So rhizomatic pedagogy is based on learning by your environment and that it changes and that it's responsive. And I feel that this type of space and creative spaces all over the world are more geared towards that. There's no way that an artist is going to learn all of the same things and therefore produce all of the same work and all of the same results. Like that's almost the opposite. So what would the opposite of that education system be? In an environment that's changing all the time, the food changes all the time, the people change all the time, the hours change all the time, the events change all the time, and that can sound really chaotic, and it's not for everyone, but it feels like it is that missing piece. Like we have this, that we've been practicing for a long time of education and working, in offices, in cubicles, but this idea of open space and co-working is becoming much more, like celebrated. Yeah.
It sounds like it's cool that you acknowledge that it's not for everyone, and like you also alluded to that in regards to introverts as well. So with regards to the personality and with regards to the habit of the person, so if they're really used to structure and have no spontaneity in their life, this sounds like a great place for them. It reminds me of something I learned about architecture, how most architectural movements are a response to the previous one. They kind of, it's like beautiful, ornate design was the thing, and then comes along something like brutalism, where it's the opposite. And that's kind of how artists and fashion and trends and what's in vogue seems to play out. It's like, let's do the opposite. Let's rebel. It's this kind of, fresh. Let's start afresh. And so that's kind of sounds like what you're doing as well. You're a kind of a trendsetter, in that you're noticing, okay, you're almost seeing this kind of, I don't know what it's called, but like a meter you're seeing, okay, society is going too far over here. Now
Yeah.
let's have some fun. Let's bring it
Yeah.
over here.
Look at way back. Yeah.
And
Totally.
it's cool that you're able to position yourself to actually do that and have that kind of influence through your
Yeah.
space. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of like really wild things that it took to get here too, because there is to me that just that far end thing, and that's activism or protest. It is like cars belong in the street. No, I'm going to stand in the middle of the street with my message. Like that is in your face. It's immediate, and it's it demands like attention. And so that to me is that's flicking the dial. We certainly do not belong or necessarily feel like we belong in the arts in this city. The arts celebrate often the final product, right? The finished product. Christchurch and a number of other cities I've been to does create exclusivity as a way of withholding value and protecting value, right? So certain people who are who have done the work for the years to get a name for themselves are only allowed in this place or at this time, right? And I think we have to have that, but we kind of flip the dial. We're just, our last exhibition was, if you made it during lockdown, if it was a painting, if it was a poem, if it was whatever, come in and hang it on the walls. Find a hammer, find a nail, put it on the wall. And we had, I think, over 100, 120 pieces, and just like the walls were just caked. And we had poems hanging from the ceiling. We had backpacks that were made during lockdown, and it was chaos, and everyone loved it. They were just like, this piece of art that I made during lockdown means so much to me, because of what we were going through, maybe emotionally and around us. And when they brought it in to hang it up, they looked at me and they're like, "You're the first human I've seen in 6 or 8 weeks." Thank you. And as the artwork started to fill the walls, everyone coming in was like, wow, we all just went through this together. Yeah. And we all got to have a creative outlet. Imagine people out there who don't have a creative outlet. Imagine people who are out there who don't have, or I think everyone has a creative outlet. They just haven't found it yet. And, or believe in themselves enough to explore it. And
owned it. Maybe I think I hear what you're saying. It's like,
yeah,
everyone's doing something as an outlet, or maybe they have something that they would like to do, but they don't give themselves permission to do it for whatever reason. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think everybody who went through has realized that they have their own processes, but then by coming together and doing a show, they realized that they had, I think, 3 things: that they gratitude for their creative outlet, gratitude for a place where it could make that invitation of if you made it, do it, show it. And so the physical place, and then again, the community of people. I saw people stand here and just cry, looking at, I did numerous times, stand and just look and be like, wow, look at how different we all are, but we all just went through the same exact thing. And it united us, it united everyone who participated. And I think it made people who came to the opening, I mean, look, I'm crying talking about it. It's just how it is. Everyone who came to the opening almost maybe think man, I wish I made something, or I wish I brought that thing that I made. I didn't realize that I am an artist, and that we all are.
Right.
And because it's been perceived as, oh, unless you're in a gallery, or unless you come from this school, or unless you've made it this far, now you can claim this title, right? And this is a bit of that counter culture, I guess, to that, and right. That flicking the needle, yeah. A bit more of the in your face of you are creative, now prove it, I invite you. And so those are the 3 things I think that socially kind of happens behind the scenes, is that noticing of oh, there's a space for this. There's this thing within myself that I'm capable of, and then there's other people doing it too, and that those all work really well together when you're trying to prompt and develop and encourage growth. Yeah.
Which brings me to the thing that I want to talk about, but we've run out of time to talk about.
Okay.
Stewardship.
Beautiful.
Being that person who's the prompter, the facilitator, the accommodator of all this, and the person who's in a position to you're kind of the last time we talked, which was yesterday,
Yeah.
we talked about social engineering, and
Yeah.
and that led to, well, I kind of called it social engineering, and then you seem to describe it more as stewardship.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, I think it's just because engineering to me has a few preconceived ideas, like of what an engineer is doing, which is like, to me, it's around metrics and measurements, and there's like something there. And when I thought of stewardship, I thought again of like relationship to something that you care for.
sure.
And yeah, and it's like a steward of like a
More like
garden.
fathering. Like fathering is also kind of social engineering, but
Totally.
more
Yeah,
like
yeah. And
stewardship.
I use the word social architecture.
Yeah,
When you said social engineering, I said, oh, social architecture. And I
right.
was like, we have these different ways of putting it. But yeah, stewardship to me is the one that sits at the center. And yeah, it's a great topic. Yeah, I love that.
I think I look forward to part 2 of this, and if you're still down to do that tomorrow, yeah, I'd love to explore this idea, because I'm starting to see it more as like you're just playing the role of like a father, and like this is just the home. Like
Yeah.
it's very cool. So yeah, we'll have to leave it there. But I just want to acknowledge you, or I do acknowledge you for your the role that you play for people in your community. It's certainly it's just inspiring.
Yeah.
And you've got some power. You're a
Mm-hmm.
powerful man for your age.
Mm-hmm.
You're what, like 25?
28.
How old are you?
Yeah, I started here when I was 24, and I'm 28 now. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I will say too, the best lead into stewardship is that there's people who practice it and maybe can get into a depth of stewardship with a community or with a space or in that role. But I feel like you've been an excellent steward of this conversation, because this would not have happened without your guidance and your prompt. And so stewardship is a fluid role, and like when I'm not in this space, I expect other people to be stewards of it and to care for
Yeah.
it and to care for each other. So I appreciate, thank you for inviting me, and I can't wait to get into more tomorrow. And yeah, I feel really well held in the conversation, and I'm excited.
Awesome, bro.
Cool. Let's talk tomorrow.
Catch you later. Peace.
Okay. See you guys.